A male was taken into custody today at Altoona, Pennsylvania this morning. He has been identified as Luigi Nicholas Mangione. He's a male, 26 years old. He was born and raised in Maryland. We know he has ties to San Francisco, California, and his last known address was Honolulu, Hawaii. He has no prior arrest history in New York. Members of the NYPD Detective Bureau are currently traveling to Pennsylvania with members of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to interview this subject. Luckily, a citizen in Pennsylvania recognized our subject and called local law enforcement. Members of the Altoona Police Department responded to the call, and based on their investigation, they notified the NYPD. This investigation is still active and ongoing.
It took law enforcement 5 days to catch up to their suspect in the shooting of the UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson, leaving everyone wondering if the obvious motive is in fact true.
I had a couple questions about the document that he was found in possession with. Can you go a little bit more in depth about those motivations that you mentioned? Was that CEO specifically named in that document? Was there anything more about him wanting to go after others? And also in that document, was there any indication that explains as how the level of detail that he went into killing him? Like, is there anything?
Like I said, that document is currently in the possession of the Altoona Police Department as part of their investigation. But just from briefly speaking with them, we don't think that there's any specific threats to other people mentioned in that document. But it does seem that he has some ill will toward corporate America.
Now, considering the large amount of supportive words that have been voiced over the past several days, he wasn't the only one that harbors ill will towards corporate America. He also appeared to have ill will towards trying to separate himself from all that damning evidence.
The suspect was in a McDonald's and was recognized by an employee who then called local police. Responding officers questioned the suspect, who was acting suspiciously and was carrying multiple fraudulent IDs as well as a U.S. passport. Upon further investigation, officers recovered a firearm on his person, as well as a suppressor, both consistent with the weapon used in the murder. They also recovered clothing, including a mask consistent with those worn by our wanted individual. Also recovered was a fraudulent New Jersey ID, matching the ID our suspect used to check into his New York City hostel before the shooting incident. Additionally, officers recovered a handwritten document that speaks to both his motivation and mindset.
So as expected, Luigi Mangione's social media presence has been immediately combed through for some indication of his mindset and degree of planning involved in this murder, partially to determine how and why he pulled it off, and also, sadly, to figure out how to blame the opposing political party. There have been reports that he acted alone, that his document said it had to be done, and he used a ghost gun that may have been 3D printed. But his 4-star review of the Unabomber's manifesto gave the public a little bit more. It's easy to quickly and thoughtlessly write this off as the manifesto of a lunatic in order to avoid facing some of the uncomfortable problems it identifies. But it's simply impossible to ignore how prescient many of his predictions about modern society turned out. He was a violent individual, rightfully imprisoned, who maimed innocent people. While these actions tend to be characterized as those of a crazy Luddite, however, they are more accurately seen as those of an extreme political revolutionary. A take I found online that I think is interesting. Had the balls to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere, and at the end of the day, he's probably right. Oil barons haven't listened to any environmentalists, but they feared him. And what he went on to write kind of gives away his motives in this murder. When all other forms of communication fail, violence is necessary to survive. You may not like his methods, but to see things from his perspective, it's not terrorism, it's war and revolution. Fossil fuel companies actively suppress anything that stands in their way, and within a generation or two, it'll begin costing human lives by greater and greater magnitudes until the Earth is just a flaming ball orbiting third from the sun. Peaceful protest is outright ignored. Economic protest isn't possible in the current system. So how long until we recognize that violence against those who lead us into such destruction is justified as self-defense? These companies don't care about you or your kids or your grandkids. They have zero qualms about burning down the planet for a buck. So why should we have any qualms about burning them down to survive? We're just animals, like anything else on this planet, except we've forgotten the law of the jungle and bend over for our overlords when any other animal would recognize the threat and fight to the death for their survival. Quote, "Violence never solved anything," is a statement uttered by cowards and predators. So some conservatives that still think it's effective to simply call this guy a lefty took his anti-corporate America thoughts and ran with them as where he should be placed in our partisan discussions. But as some conservatives talkers found out last week after the murder happened, their viewers don't agree that disdain for predatory capitalism, assisted by our elected officials, is just simply a deplorable lefty point of view. Ben Shapiro ran with the evil revolutionary left cheers murder, completely forgetting that Donald Trump's campaign partially appealed to the frustrations of MAGA supporters over the ruling class's control over us. They just don't have any plans of doing anything about it, which is an entirely different story, by the way. But still, the responses were brutal to Ben Shapiro. L take. I'm glad the comment section noticed. The CEO was actually a criminal. My God, conservatives, liberal, and lefties are hugging it out in the comments. My God, this is beautiful. Surprise, out-of-touch rich guy defends other rich guys. Hate to break it to you, buddy, but it's not just the left who's sick of this. I'm not buying this left versus right anymore, Ben. I want healthcare for my family. I just realized your entire business model requires that us normal folk hate each other. This has to be the first time I'm seeing Ben get cooked by his own comment section. Luigi is in for a tough life now that he's in custody for this high-profile killing. But what he's ignited among many regular Americans that were too timid to say out loud might change the way elected officials and the corporate world go about dividing us.
Well, he was railing against the healthcare industry, which of course fits into the scenario here. He talks about how these parasites had it coming. He starts off basically saying, I don't want to cause any trauma, but it had to be done. So a second page really kind of goes into problems with the health industry. He raises the question, why do we have the most expensive healthcare in the world, but we're 42, rated 42 in life expectancy around the world? I can't vet his facts or findings there, but it was talking about the healthcare industry and the need for violence. I mean, especially when you talk about, the opening, which is that it had to be done. These parasites, had it coming.